born on the 22nd of January 1869 as Grigory Yesemovich Novik, a Catholic Christian, into a peasant farming family in the tiny Siberian village of Pokrovska. He claimed he developed mystical skills at the age of 12. He went to a school, but it was not suited to his free spirit. During adolescence, he earned the name Rasputin for his wild behavior, drinking, seducing, and engaging in crime. It derives from the Russian for dissolute, although supporters claim it derives from the Russian word for crossroads. But soon, Rasputin supposedly had a series of visions where a saint kept asking him to be one with God. By the age of 18, during one of his pilgrimages, he decided to renounce his criminal lifestyle and undergo a religious conversion. He started following a sect called Kleshti, who were flagellants. The Kleshti sect was a spiritual Christian sect that split from the Russian Orthodox Church and existed in the country from the early 17th century to the late 20th century. They believed in direct communication with the Holy Spirit and its embodiment in living beings. They also renounced monkhood, holy books, and veneration of the saints. They also believed that you became closest to God when you had overcome your earthly passions, and the best way to achieve this was through sexual exhaustion. At some point during his time as a hermit, Rasputin had developed a habit of talking to himself. The men of his village learned to live with his eccentricities for their own safety. When Rasputin felt he was being mocked, he had a reputation for plunging into the crowd and beating as many men as he could while screaming curses at them. On the 2nd of February 1887, Grigory marries Praskovia Dubrovina. They will go on to have 3 children, Dmitri, Matriona, and Varvara. By his late 20s, despite being married with a young family, Rasputin started attracting crowds where they lived in western Siberia. Lacking a local church, he started holding religious services in his own house. News spread of healing and miracles, and this drew the peasants in. By 1902, the crowds had grown too large to fit into his home, so Rasputin decided a larger venue which would attract an even larger audience must be the will of God. So he embarked on the first of a series of long pilgrimages, beginning with several months spent at the Orthodox monastery of St. Nicholas at Verkhovskaya. Transformed spiritually by the experience, Rasputin became a strannik, a wandering pilgrim, forging a word-of-mouth reputation as a charismatic itinerant mystic with a gift for healing. Having built a devoted following in Siberia, he won over the hierarchy of the Orthodox Church in the region, who advised him to travel to the Russian capital, St. Petersburg, and sent word to patriarchs there to expect him. Around 1903, Rasputin arrived in St. Petersburg, awaiting introduction to a Russian court that was deeply interested in the esoteric and the occult. The Siberian peasant turned holy man had incredible charisma. bad teeth, and even for the era, questionable hygiene. He claimed that he once went 6 months without changing his underwear. He was said to emit a strong animal odor, like a goat, according to the French ambassador. Rasputin also had a number of disturbing facial and body tics that made people around him nervous. While distracted or talking, his arms would jerk and his hands fluttered wildly. Sometimes his whole torso would seize momentarily while he made a particularly emphatic point. Rasputin was first introduced to the Tsar and Tsarina in 1905. The Tsar's court had a long tradition of holy men, mystics and other esoteric people, and Nicholas II and his wife were heavily involved in the occult. A succession of charlatans were paraded through the court, and Nicholas believed he was in contact with his dead father. At the same time Rasputin entered St. Petersburg, one of the most dangerous moments in its 200-year-old history was transpiring. In 1904, Russia was badly losing a vicious war with Japan. Men across the country were being drafted, and estates were being taxed to support a Far East conflict that seemed to be the Tsar's pet project. When the Russian fleet was destroyed at Tsushima, riots erupted in the streets. Active revolutionaries in the crowds turned food riots into a full-blown revolt against the monarchy, which was swiftly put down with volleys of rifle fire from returning troops. In 1908, a crucial event changed Rasputin's life. He was called to the royal palace because the Tsar's son was experiencing bleeding from the genetic disorder hemophilia. Contemporaries claimed that Rasputin could hypnotize people with his eyes, and it's possible he hypnotized Alexei, perhaps influencing the boy's subconscious to slow the bleeding dramatically. The mystic monk declared he had directed healing through some prayers and direct communication with God. Rasputin undoubtedly aided the boy, and he informed the royals that he believed the future of both the boy and the ruling Romanov dynasty were deeply connected to himself. Rasputin became our friend to the Romanov family, and was summoned whenever Alexei needed healing. In 1912, the prince's condition deteriorated so badly that he received the last sacrament. On hearing the news, Rasputin sent a telegram to Alexandra, reading, "The little one will not die. Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much." Sound advice considering their limited capabilities. The royals felt desperately indebted to Rasputin, and he became a regular visitor at the palace. Rasputin's advice to stop giving the boy aspirin also helped alleviate some of Alexei's symptoms and cemented his mother's faith in the monk. By 1907, he was a regular caller at the palace, and felt confident enough to advise the Tsar on matters of state. While it's unclear exactly how much influence he had in this arena, he had enough to make nobles feel threatened. This provoked several powerful rivals to attempt to get Rasputin prosecuted within the church. Rasputin's interpretation of the Bible had always been unusual, but now the spiritual consistory of Tobolska was demanding a trial for heresy. Specifically, he was accused of holding beliefs similar to a suppressed Orthodox cult from Siberia, which, if true, would have seen him defrocked and possibly imprisoned. When he managed to avoid prosecution in 1908, Grigory Rasputin's prestige only grew. Even when he was accused of rape, he was still not even close to being removed from power. And by 1911, most of his enemies had either fallen out of favor with the Romanovs or had been exiled. By 1912, the odd, sometimes violent monk from Siberia was arguably the main power broker in Russia. Despite his filthy hair, beard and malodorous aroma, Rasputin's followers grew in number, and he took pleasure in their fanatic worship. There are accounts that Rasputin dipped his dirt-crusted fingers into jam, so women could humble themselves by licking them clean. He supposedly honored his followers further with innuendo-laden nicknames or by having them bathe his naked body. Once he allegedly invited 2 young sisters to a bathhouse and declared to their mother that it was their day of salvation. Police reports described Rasputin at various times as very drunk, dead drunk, and overcome with drink. Even after much excess, the man of God, known for his ability to go without sleep, was back on the street. A brief lie-down would set him up for his next trip, to his beloved banya, the bathhouse where he could have his genitals soaped by one of the little ladies, as he called his female followers. After which they would thrash him with twigs. After this enthusiastic session, he was ready for a brisk walk to the nearest church to renounce Satan. As he said repeatedly, "Without sin there is no repentance." During the next few years, Rasputin lived a double life, acting as a humble peasant while around the immediate royal family, but outside living a debauched lifestyle, seducing noble women, as well as drinking heavily and consorting with prostitutes. The Tsar rejected any complaints levelled against the mystic, even exiling some of his accusers. Compromising photographs were quickly hushed up. However, in 1911, the dissent became so great, Prime Minister Stolypin issued the Tsar with a report on Rasputin's actions, which the Tsar promptly ignored. The Tsarina remained both desperate for aid for her son and in Rasputin's thrall. The Tsar, also afraid for his son and pleased that the Tsarina was placated, ignored all complaints. The Tsar saw in Rasputin the sort of simple peasant rusticity he hoped would support him in leading a return to a more old-fashioned autocracy. The royal family felt increasingly isolated and welcomed what they thought was an honest peasant friend. Hundreds would come to see him. Even his blackened fingernail clippings were taken as relics. They wanted his magical powers to cure their ills, and his influence over the Tsarina for more earthly issues. He was a legend across Russia, and they brought him many gifts. They were the Rasputinki. He was a huge fan of the telephone, and could almost always be reached for advice. Acolytes would crowd in their hundreds outside his house, hoping to seek an audience with Rasputin, and would leave gifts of flowers. "Idiots bring flowers every day. They know I love them," he once quipped. Rasputin's truly holy work, however, was carried out by sleeping with these women. They were promised that contact with his body would purify their soul. Although he had sex with countless women, including married nobles, Rasputin's wife and mother to his children remained loyal. Treated like any other of his devotees, she once said, "He has enough for all." As Rasputin's influence over the Romanovs rose, their popularity went down. They already struggled for support, as Nicholas II didn't have the strength of character of his father, Alexander III, especially following his ineffective leadership during the Revolution of 1905. Meanwhile, Alexandra, as a German, was treated with suspicion in Russia's insular society, worsened by her desire to live in seclusion to raise her children, rather than be a public face of the dynasty. So when the Romanovs elevated a peasant mystic with a lascivious reputation, it made them fiercely unpopular with all levels of Russian society. There were several attempts on Rasputin's life. The first known attempt, or at least the first one anybody recorded, came in the summer of 1914. On this day, Rasputin was approached on the street by what he thought was an old beggar woman, but the beggar was a disguised ex-follower of a monk who despised Rasputin, called Iliador. While Rasputin was fishing through his pockets for loose change, the woman produced a dagger and struck him just above the navel, partially disemboweling him. The woman purportedly screamed, "I have killed the Antichrist," after the attack. But it would take more than that to kill Rasputin. Instead, he called on his aged dog, Alaska, to help him. The elderly dog attacked the beggar woman, but she eventually dispatched it with her knife. But this gave Rasputin enough time to run to nearby trees and grab a stick, which he used to beat the fleeing woman. Iliodor then immediately went into hiding, and Rasputin spent the next few weeks recovering from his injuries. Kiyonia Guseva was the name of the would-be assassin. Police reports indicate that she was 33 at the time. She was lacking a nose and her face was disfigured, probably because of syphilis. She denied this and claimed she was damaged by medicines at the age of 13. In the summer of 1915, with the war going poorly for Russia, Nicholas decided to leave the capital and assume command of the Russian army. This was a moderately bad idea militarily, but it was a disastrous idea for the government, which was left in Alexandra's hands. The Tsarina was devoted to Russia, but inexperienced and blinded by her belief in Rasputin. Under their joint direction, a series of catastrophic decisions were made, as experienced ministers who disliked Rasputin were dismissed in favor of non-entities and incompetents. For years there had been rumors, allegedly fueled by Rasputin's boasts, that he and the Empress were lovers. Now people became convinced they were also German spies. In March 1915, Rasputin pulled down his trousers and, as one eyewitness put it, waved around his reproductive organ in a restaurant while dancing on a table. When the report reached the ears of the Romanovs, they refused to believe it. "I know Rasputin too well to believe all the tittle-tattle about him," stated Nicholas. Alexandra went further with her praise. "Saints are always calumniated. He is hated because we love him." Such was Rasputin's charisma and influence. He could transcend criticism with an almost supernatural ubiquity. "Rasputin is everything. Rasputin is everywhere," wrote the poet Alexander Blok. In November, a month before Rasputin's murder, Felix Yusupov contacted his longtime friend Maria Golovina. He complained that he had been having chest pains and that doctors had been unable to cure it. She suggested that he seek out Rasputin's healing powers, as Yusupov knew she would. Golovina arranged for Rasputin to meet Yusupov at her apartment, and the two men began spending time together. Rasputin took to calling Yusupov Little One. In order to keep their friendship a secret, Yusupov told Rasputin that he would enter and exit Rasputin's apartment via a staircase in the back. Many have speculated that more than just healing went on at these sessions and that the two were sexually involved. Then 29, the prince was bisexual and not adverse to what he called love affairs of a special kind, even after marrying Princess Irena, an acknowledged beauty, in 1914. Later, Yusupov would write that he and Rasputin had spent long evenings together, talking about politics, and that the peasant mystic had tried to talk him into supporting peace on the grounds that it was the only way to save the monarchy and avoid a civil war. But as far as the prince was concerned, this was treason, and he resolved to do something about it. On the night of the 30th of December 1916, Yusupov invited Rasputin to dinner at his house. That day Rasputin had finished off his 12th bottle of Madeira wine, before receiving a visitor, a plump blonde called Sister Maria. His niece Anna, who was there, recalled that this was no spiritual advisor. She helped him to remove the tension that apparently took hold of him against his will, she recalled. That evening he trudged through the snow-covered streets of Petrograd, on his way to the home of Yusupov, for a rendezvous with his beautiful young wife Irena. On arrival, Rasputin was shown into a room in the palace's basement, safely out of earshot of potential witnesses. Befuddled by the Madeira he had drunk earlier that day, he was told that the princess was upstairs and that he could meet her as soon as Yusupov and his 3 friends had left. In fact, she was far away in the Crimea. The conspirators intended to poison Rasputin while he waited for the promised liaison. Despite consuming enough cyanide-laced wine and food they plied him with, Rasputin showed no signs of succumbing. Suspecting their victim was being protected by supernatural powers, it was then that Yusupov retrieved a revolver and shot him at close range. Somehow, however, he didn't die. As the conspirators celebrated with a glass of wine, Rasputin opened his eyes, got to his feet and made it to the courtyard before being chased down and shot a second time, sending him crashing to the ground at the palace gate. Rasputin certainly should have been dead by then. Yusupov had launched a ferocious attack with a cudgel, beating him so thoroughly and viciously that even his testicles were crushed. As Yusupov recalled, this devil, who was dying of poison, who had a bullet in his heart, must have been raised from the dead by the powers of evil. There was something appalling and monstrous in his diabolical refusal to die. For good measure, one more bullet was fired, this time into his brain. They wrapped the body in a carpet and hurled it into the Neva River. His body was found 2 days later, when a sleeve from his fur coat was spotted protruding from the ice. Not long before he died, Rasputin allegedly wrote a warning to the Romanovs, reading, "When the bell tolls 3 times, it will announce that I have been killed. If I am killed by common men, you and your children will rule Russia for centuries to come. If I am killed by one of your stock, you and your family will be killed by the Russian people. Pray, Tsar of Russia, pray." the Romanov dynasty did indeed come crashing down after more than 3 centuries, with the revolution of 1917. His assassins had hoped to save the autocracy, but if anything, things became worse, and in any case it was too late. Just 2 months later, crowds took to the streets of St. Petersburg, and Nicholas was forced to give up the throne. The Romanov rulers weren't just deposed, but executed by the Bolsheviks, falling as Rasputin predicted. When they were shot and bayoneted to death by the Bolsheviks in July 1918, their murderers discovered lockets around the necks of the Tsarina and her 4 young daughters. Each contained a picture of Rasputin. In death, as well as in life, the Rasputin story is shrouded in awed mythology, making it difficult at this historical distance to separate facts from the rumours. Perhaps the most sober contemporary observations come from the writer and satirist Nadezhda Lokvitskaya, known as Tefi, who dined twice with Rasputin. He was a semi-literate peasant and a counsellor to the Tsar, a hardened sinner and a man of prayer, a shape-shifter with the name of God on his lips, she recalled in 1932. The mysterious voice, the intense expression, the commanding words, all this was a tried and tested method. She described how, whenever he said something, he would look around the whole group, his eyes piercing each person in turn, as if to say, "Have I got you thinking? Are you satisfied? Have I surprised you?" How firmly and vividly his character is etched into my memory, she wrote. And not simply because he was so very famous. In my life I've met many famous people who have truly earned their renown. Nor is it because he played such a tragic role in the fate of Russia. No, this man was unique, one of a kind, like a character out of a novel. He lived in legend, he died in legend, and his memory is cloaked in legend. Well, my dear friends, firstly, I hope you enjoyed the presentation and welcome to 2024. My goodness, time is flying by, isn't it? Now, I'm not going to ramble too much on this one. It's been another long one. Just wanted to say a few words about Rasputin. What did you think of him? Did he have any magical abilities? Was he a healer? Could he see the future? I definitely believe that he had a certain hypnotic quality. He could, as they say, put somebody under his spell. I believe he was a natural hypnotist. He could actually get people to submit to his willpower. And it's quite possible he was a healer. I'm not sure about that, but he definitely had some abilities above the normal human being. And that's not to mention his incredible stamina, almost supernatural. I mean, you could see towards the end there that they had a terrible time trying to end him. And I'd just like to say, I think this, what's his name, that prince, I can't remember at the moment his exact name, Yusupov or someone like that. What a coward. What a coward. Couldn't meet him face to face for a duel. Had to get a gang of his other aristocrats and then poison him first to make him senseless before they would even dare to shoot him. What a cowardly act that is. And they had a hell of a job even then to end him. I saw someone on the internet had suggested that the cyanide that they had used to poison him with had probably degraded and was no longer lethal. Yeah, it's a possible explanation why he didn't succumb to that. Because I definitely think those Yusupov and his gang of thugs wouldn't have stood a chance against a sober, non-poisoned Rasputin. I think he would have taken them out very easily. Indeed. And they knew that. And I'd just like to say, light-heartedly, this tradition that they brought about where they would soap his genitals in the bathhouse, considering his bathing habits, it was probably for their benefit, the women's benefit, that they did wash his genitals. He must have stunk. Oh dear. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on Rasputin, what you think of him. One thing is for sure, Yusupov's intentions was to save the monarchy, and it did the exact opposite. The killing of Rasputin was just as Rasputin had forewarned, the downfall of the monarchy, and Yusupov himself and his wife Irina had to flee into exile. Many of you would know that Rasputin had several children, but not all of you would know that one of his children, his daughter Maria, also had quite an interesting life. Let's take a quick look at a blog about her. She is the one, by the way, that I've highlighted in this photo. This is on the website atlasobscura.com. The article is by Hadley Mears, November the 4th, 2015. The Many Lives of Maria Rasputin, Daughter of the Mad Monk. You can see here she was she was an animal trainer in the circus in the 1930s. Isn't that an amazing photograph? Poor elephants. I will leave the link to this article. I'm not going to read all the way through it. The article does not belong to me, so I will leave the link in the description and you can read it at your leisure. But we'll have a quick scroll through it and see some images of Maria. Look there. I'm guessing, I'm not sure which one she is there. What it says there, Maria is, yeah, she must be the one left. This must be Maria here. And there we see, as I showed you in the previous image, that is her at a dinner party with her father and other guests. And there she is. Look at that wonderful traditional Russian outfit. Wow. Apparently, she tried her hand at a few different jobs and ended up penniless, unfortunately. Marriage problems, he deserted me, that's all. Ended up, she worked as a machinist at the shipyards in San Pedro. Wow, she did a little bit of everything. There she is having dinner with a journalist from the Spanish magazine. Of course, her father's legacy followed her around as well, I guess to some advantage and a lot of disadvantage. So she ended her life with Social Security payments and gigs as a babysitter and caregiver. She was a friendly, amiable lady, lived a quiet, secluded life, faithfully attending the neighborhood Russian Orthodox Church almost every week. Anyway, I will leave that article for you to read. and I wish you all a wonderful start to 2024. Thank you for all of those who have stayed with me throughout last year and who are also watching me now in January. Take care, my friends. God bless, and bye-bye. Oh, just before I go, I thought I would mention the myth surrounding Rasputin's penis, because someone is going to mention it for sure and say that I've forgotten to talk about it. So, yes, the great man himself, apparently his penis was lopped off and preserved in a jar of formaldehyde after his death. And there's a lot of rumors going on around that. I'm not going to read all the way through this, but I will leave the link for you to read. It is a myth. This is the actual object. I've had to blur it out because YouTube would literally have a stroke and probably delete the video, but you can see it in all its glory once you click on the link. They say it's probably just a severed cow's or horse's penis, which I think it is. The real fate of Rasputin's penis, however, is likely a lot less interesting. An autopsy was performed at that time, 1917, and after the body was retrieved from the river, he was certainly the worse for wear after his violent murder. His penis was all in one piece. I remember that Yusupov and his gang had really mutilated his genitals by kicking him in that area. So they're all myths and legends. One of the other ones that was apparently preserved in a jar was just a sea cucumber. And this one here, the guy paid $8,000 for it. Wow, which is nothing to do with Rasputin at all. Before I go, also, here's a quick blooper for you. All right, my friends, I'm definitely off now. Bye-bye. In March 1915, Rasputin pulled down his trousers and, as one eyewitness put it, waved around his reproductive organ in a restaurant while dancing on it. What? Oh my goodness, I just got a mental picture of that.